Okay, so because of technical reasons, we moved from WebEx interactive session to one that's going to be recorded and then posted. And then you can ask me questions on email. So I'm actually going to start with, very briefly, with the actual situation for the Utah ESSA state plan. It still has not been approved. There are three major issues in relationship to what has to be resolved. There are other issues, and generally they're in Title I, where there were subcommittees organized to try to come up with solutions that will be presented with recommendations, as a recommendation to the state board next week at the board meeting. So it'd be important for you to pay attention to when that's going to happen. The first one is related to alternative schools, because previously alternative schools were not a part of the regular accountability system, and ESSA is very clear that all public schools must be included in the accountability system. I was on that committee with a good representation of data and statistics people, accountability people, and then those who represent alternative schools. And we came up with a preliminary plan, which would be a level 1 analysis of the requirements for state accountability and federal accountability, and then secondary characteristics and qualifications that would provide more flexibility to alternative schools. So we feel like we've come up with a very, responsive solution that addresses the need in the statute for all public schools to be evaluated under the same accountability system, but with some flexibility for alternative schools. The second issue was the disproportionate representation of ineffective and inexperienced teachers in high poverty or Title I schools. Diana Sudworth was in that committee, and they worked on coming up with specific solutions related to really addressing the issues in the statute. And one of which is making public as No Child Left Behind requirement for not highly qualified, even though that language is not used in ESSA. And then the third big issue was the 95% test rate and the opt-out state law in relationship to the requirements for federal accountability for the testing rate. So even though Title III was approved, there were also recommendations provided by peer reviewers to really be more specific in relationship to how USBE, or the state education agency, was going to support schools who were not making growth with their English learners related to academic subject areas. So we included in that more of a focus on the application for the Title IIIA funds in relationship to ongoing technical assistance, increased webinars in academic content. When we have the visits, the classroom instruction in academic areas, and as well as if there are ELD coaches who are providing support for teachers, not just in ELD, but also in regular classrooms, and the quality of the professional development necessary to help regular ed teachers provide scaffolded instruction to make academic content comprehensible. So we've addressed those issues, and part of the way in which we've addressed them is also the change in the grants management system. Today I just met with the new grants management person, and now there is going to be a separate application for Title III funds, like it was in the UCA, but very focused on assurances and monitored by the self-assessment tool. So everything is now aligned, and it won't be in the DMI, which has been a challenge for everyone, I think. And all those tools will be in a folder according to the LEA and by the year on a hard drive at the state office at USBE in under Title III under the monitoring folder, which will be a copy of everything that you have electronically, so that if you're randomly selected for an audit, which would happen when the federal audits happen, then you'll be prepared. So the whole intention really is to think of a really inclusive and systematic way to be prepared for the monitoring visits is really focused on instruction, but so it's not an audit. I just want to make sure that you understand that. We've been told by the federal government and the feedback that we got that in Title III, now accountability in Title I, the state education agency, it's their responsibility to provide the kind of technical assistance to build the capacity of the LEAs to use funds effectively and to actually make a difference in relationship to practices in the classroom for increased progress and growth with English learners and refugees and immigrant students. That's the reason the focus in the monitoring is really programmatic. Granite School District will actually be the first school district that we have content specialists in a feeder pattern with the most ELs really focusing on classroom instruction as well as reviewing the self-monitoring tool, which is aligned to the ESSA statute. The other thing is, if there are schools that are in turnaround or school improvement, we're not going to overly burden them, but I will be involved in the monitoring of those schools since Title III is now in Title I and the state accountability system. Those schools, particularly charter schools, that aren't in state turnaround or any kind of level of improvement, I myself will be coming and doing the monitoring. I think charter schools are, since it's just a school, is much easier, and that would be, instead of 3 days with a team coming, it would be 2 days at the maximum, generally 1 day, especially in relationship to the looking and reviewing the documents in the monitoring self-assessment tool. Okay, so on the screen you should have the application for Title IIIA funds. Now, this is going to be in the grants management system. It's being uploaded now. And when the budgets, the federal grants come out, usually in May, then you'll get a chance to look at the preliminary allocations and then begin to fill out the application for access to those funds. So the point of this is aligning the annual program evaluation that's based on the statute, using data effectively in the student learning needs assessment, and then aligning resources to ensure increased student outcomes. And this is, in particular, it's in ESSA section 3114. And it's the annual improvement plan is identified in ESSA as the local plan in section 116. So on your screen it'll say the annual improvement plan identified as the LEA as a local plan will provide a description of the program's activities conducted by the lII, with the funds received and how such programs and activities supplemented programs primarily funded by state and local funds. So you can see that it's very clear that the way in which you use your funds and describe them, and you explain how you're using data to evaluate the effectiveness of your language instruction program. You have 4 specific questions. The first one is about explaining how you're going to use student data. All that student data that's for recording requirements will be in your self-monitoring and your monitoring self-assessment tool that I've gone over several times. And is supposed to be uploaded in the DMI. I know some people have had some difficulty with it. But the whole point of trying to do it earlier is that you'll have a baseline to work with, and so you won't be caught off at the last minute. The second one, besides in explaining how you're using student data to evaluate the effectiveness of your program, you're going to describe your model for instruction. This is very similar to what was in the UCA and is a requirement in ESSA and was an ESCA as well for instruction and curriculum materials in elementary and secondary that you use to supplement local and state funding. Then the third question is explain how you allocate resources to individual schools to impact schools' increased success for English learners, specifically meeting annual growth goals toward English language proficiency and supporting increased academic achievement in mathematics, English language arts, and science. Okay, so this is a really serious requirement. If the way in which you've allocated resources to schools have not made an impact and you haven't even kind of achieved the growth in relationship to the 2015-2016 data, even before WIDA was recalibrated, then the point is to really see how those allocations to schools are making a difference. And you know, we've used all kinds of examples. We used a Provo's strategy around weighting per pupil allocation, and then aligning, you know, ALS and instructional support within the schools based on the needs of the, you know, of each school and supporting each school. And then the last one is list specific schools that did not meet the interim goals for ELs in the state/federal accountability, because these are aligned now with ELs. So we do have ELs in state accountability with an N size of 10. Please explain how you will support them. That means the schools that did not meet their interim goals with the strategic reallocation of resources. So that's people, materials, professional learning, and funds. So ultimately the question is, if you have a school that hasn't met the annual growth goals for English learners, then it's incumbent upon the LEA to focus and evaluate the way in which instruction is happening. So we're trying to support you in those kinds of ways by reinstating monthly webinars. The first one's going to be, I think, in science, which will begin probably in the summer, and it'll be archived on our YouTube channel, so you'll have access to it. So those are the 4 questions that must be answered in the application. Now, the reason this is important is that the application will be due November 1st. This will give you planning time because you'll have an initial allocation. You'll be able to look at your data and then really respond to these questions in the application. Then there are assurances. The assurances for Title III are based on the statute and the self-monitoring tool. So the monitoring tool is really critical in developing your electronic portfolio to maintain all the evidence to support how you're using resources to actually support progress for English learners. So here are the assurances. The lII provides effective language instruction programs, both in elementary and secondary, that meet the needs of English learners and demonstrate success for each English learner by meeting interim and long-term growth goals by each school as articulated in the ESSA State Plan for English language proficiency in academic subjects. Again, this means that you're going to have to be really familiar as soon as the entire ESSA State Plan is approved. That'll be uploaded onto the Title III website. It'll also be uploaded into Title I and the other title programs. So you can really focus on looking at the targets. And when the data dashboard for the ELs ends up being developed, then that's the piece where you'll have access to the data gateway and to the data that you need. And anytime you need extra support, you know, we tried to do it with the webinars, but if you wanted face-to-face time with particular schools or your teams to work with schools, then all you have to do is make those requests and we would be available. The second assurance is the lII provides effective professional development designed to improve the instruction and assessment of English learners and is effective in increasing the students' English language proficiency or substantially increasing subject matter knowledge, teaching knowledge, and teaching skills of teachers. So really, the way in which professional learning is developed, it has to be sustained. So if you have ELD coaches and, you know, the way in which they're working is not specifically tied to schools and providing feedback in relationship to quality instruction, then you have to figure out how you're going to use those coaches in a different way, or hold them accountable, or provide more professional development for them, or, you know, there's a whole range of ways that ELD coaches or instructional coaches can be provided the kind of support where they're in classrooms and they're making a significant difference. And the third one is the LEA's language instruction educational programs are staffed with appropriately licensed, certified, endorsed teachers, and this is pretty much based on the board rule, as well as civil rights legislation and ESSA. These are all the key components for ensuring that students have high-quality instruction. You know, which means you need to have plans for ongoing professional learning to support teachers who are working with English learners. Not only those who are teaching ELD and have materials to support that, but also regular education teachers who need to shelter their instruction in the content area so that students have access to it. And also some other districts I know are working really diligently in relationship to working with newcomers and refugee students. So all those things are very, very important because the outcomes really focus on the needs of the individual learner in relationship to increased growth toward English language proficiency and academic language in the content areas. Number 4, the LEA has a process to ensure special education services to English learners with identified and qualifying disabilities through the school's individualized education program team and as articulated by the Special Education Department at USBE. So we're working more closely, Title III and special education, and one of the really key reasons is related to child fine law in special ed. So when you have students who are English learners, you have to really bring to bear the issue of how language interferes with the disability and how you do assessments that really support understanding dual services for English learners with disabilities. It is against law, it is against the law to say we're not going to assess students for special education until they're English proficient. Okay, that in no world does that make any kind of sense. If you need support from special education at USB with the team organized in relationship to Title III and special needs students who are English learners, then we're available. You want to be supported in the way in which you're meeting the needs and providing dual services if that's necessary. Number 5 is the lII follows the entrance, exit, and four-year monitoring procedures as outlined in the ESSA state plan. So our Title III plan has been approved. So the entrance, the exit, the four-year monitoring, working together as a team, notifying parents, all the notifications are in 7 different kinds of languages, and we haven't put any of that up yet on the Title III web page because we're waiting for the final approval of the entire state plan. The next one is the lII ensures that internal controls, which means policies, processes, and procedures, are implemented to effectively use resources, supplement, not supplant, at the school level to support the purpose of the grant, which is increased outcomes for English learners. We cannot have, funding that's allocated in a way that we're not evaluating in relationship to the kind of instruction that happens in the classroom, whether it's materials or tutoring. I've been doing focus groups with lots of students at the high school level, English learners and ESL students, and a wide range of students. And one of the things that they have said to me is the way in which tutoring is provided and how tutors are trained makes a huge difference for them. It provides them with more support and more confidence. The lII ensures that no student is denied the opportunity to participate in a class or a school-sponsored activity because of the inability to pay a fee. I didn't put, all the legal issues related to this, but there are serious issues in relationship to creating equitable access while at the same time disenfranchising students because of the way in which fees are charged at the secondary level. And this is, as you know, has been an issue with refugee students. It still is. And there's a new bill in the state legislature addressing this with, audit capacity in relationship to complaints from parents. So for us, this is a really critical piece. If in fact we say we value each student, we support family values, this means that we really want every single student, no matter their economic circumstance, to have an opportunity to a high-quality education. Number 8 is the lII understands its legal obligation in Section 1703F of the Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 and the Joint Guidance on the Civil Rights of English Learners to overcome language barriers that impede English learners from participating equally in the state and LE educational programs. Now, the reason I put these things in here is that these are legal responsibilities for the lII to ensure that the civil rights of English learners, refugees, and immigrant students, and unaccompanied minors that those civil rights are not just valued, but that the legal obligation of the lII is taken seriously, which includes ensuring that administrators, teachers, counselors, everyone who has any impact on a student's life to provide quality educational experiences for them understands the civil rights of English learners. This is not negotiable. This is just what is not only in code, but also at the federal level, as well as issues of civil rights and non-discriminatory practices. The lEI understands its legal obligations, so we said number 8. And the number 9, the lEI ensures that parents receive meaningful communication in a language they can understand, such as through translated materials or a language interpreter, and to adequate notice of information about any program, service, or activity that is called to the attention of English-speaking parents. Okay, again, remember, supplemental fees and Title III fees, this is not you don't use these for what your civil rights obligation is, which is to make sure that parents receive meaningful communications, and it has to be in a language that they understand. So that means the way in which you look at your resources must include translation services, not Title III funds. The lEI offers equitable services to eligible private school students, teachers, and other educational personnel by initiating the consultation process with officials of private schools before the start of each year. That because right out of ESEA, and then the regulations related to eligible services has been reinforced as a priority with ESSA. So pretty much those are the 10 assurances. There might be a few additions or variations, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. The application for the Title IIIA fees. This is the application, which I'll review. It would be like reviewing the UCA. And then you would also upload to the application the monitoring tool. Because remember, the self-assessment monitoring tool is helping you stay organized in relationship to what the ESSA statute says, what the civil rights statutes say, and the kind of evidence that you would have in an electronic portfolio in case, you end up being randomly selected to be audited by the Department of Education. The last thing is, again, in the monitoring visits, I'll be working with state turnaround and accountability teams to support you with English learners. And so there won't be a separate Title III monitoring visit. The monitoring visits are only for those who have Title III funds, and especially for charters, and there are two consortium that are districts, that are rural districts that work together. And the focus is not to overburden LEAs with lots of monitoring and lots of consultants. We're here to try to, the obligation for us is to provide, as a state agency, the technical assistance and the support to really help you do the best for your students. That's the point. And so I really encourage you, email me with questions as soon as the ESSA plan is presented to the board and the board gives the approval to submit it to the feds. I'm hoping all those approvals will happen within the next month. And then the development of the website for Title III, I think, will be another big support. We're not doing a master plan in the sense that was done last time, but the really simple, flexible Title III plan, which is the estate plan, as it has been approved. So with resources and support connected to providing the resources and the technical support to help you not only use funds more appropriately, but really make solid decisions in relationship to quality instruction for English learners, refugee students, and immigrant students, and those students who are unaccompanied minors. So thank you so much for your ongoing efforts, your commitment. I've had so many people, and this was when we worked on the waiver, and we had the Assistant Attorney General come and do the presentation. He was inspired by your commitment and your questions and your concern and your compassion. And this is what makes the work that we do here really important. It's because of the work that you do and how we can support you. So thank you very much, and if you have questions, please email me.